his pulse quicken. He knew that one of the means of execution the local Indians used was to place a man's head on a stone and smash his skull with heavy clubs. And that, apparently, was the end Chief Powhatan had chosen for John Smith. Several warriors grabbed John and pulled him forward. They forced his head down onto the cold stone and stood back as the two warriors stepped forward and raised their clubs. As John waited for the searing pain of the first blow against the side of his head, a million thoughts wanted to race through his mind. But the one that found voice was, "So this is how the life of the boy from Lincolnshire is going to end." Chapter 2. Dreams of Adventure. It was a warm summer morning in Lincolnshire in 1588. An 8-year-old John Smith and the two sons of Lord Willoughby, Peregrine and Robert Bertie, were making their way across the rolling green countryside to the ocean. They planned to build a boat when they reached their destination and sail away out into the North Sea. John's dream was to become just like Sir Francis Drake. Sir Francis was John's hero, not just because he was the first Englishman to sail around the world, but because just weeks before, Sir Francis had saved England from an invasion by the Spanish. In fact, the great regret in John's life was that his younger brother, and not he, had been given the name Francis. As the boys walked along, they came upon the remains of a huge bonfire. John kicked at the ashes, sending a fine puff of cinders into the air. "You know what this is?" he asked. Peregrine and Robert stared blankly at him. "It's the remains of one of the signal fires warning of the approach of the Spanish Armada," John said, answering his own question. "But we had a surprise for the Spanish. Sir Francis Drake was not about to let them invade England without a fight," he continued, using the opportunity to tell Peregrine and Robert all he knew about the incident. "Sir Francis and Sir John Hawkins made them pay. The English ships were faster and had better cannons than the Spanish. It wasn't long before ships of the Armada were heading to the bottom of the sea at the hands of the English. And then a great storm blew up and sank many more of the Spanish ships. Soon what remained of the Armada was retreating home to Spain, beaten once again by their old foe, Sir Francis Drake." John puffed out his chest as he walked. When he grew up, he was going to be just like Sir Francis Drake. He was going to live a life full of adventure and conquest in far-flung corners of the earth. And when the boys reached the ocean, John's first adventure was going to begin. At the beach, John and the Bertie boys set to work building a raft. They located several logs washed up on the sand and dragged them to the water's edge. They lashed the logs together with the rope they had brought with them. Once they were satisfied that the logs were tied together tightly enough, they went in search of long sticks to pole the raft out to sea once it was launched. By early afternoon, they had found the sticks they needed, and the three boys began to drag the raft into the water. This was not easy work, but eventually, bit by bit, the boys nudged the logs forward until they were bobbing in the ocean. Once the raft was afloat, they pushed it out beyond the waves breaking at the shore and climbed aboard. John immediately took command of the vessel, standing at the back of the raft and shouting orders to Peregrine and Robert to pole harder. "So this is what it's like to be Sir Francis Drake," John thought, as the raft left the shore behind and headed out into the North Sea. Now it was time to hunt for marauding Spanish ships and attack them. "We're sinking! We're sinking!" came Peregrine's words, interrupting John's reverie. Sure enough, when John brought his focus back to the raft, seawater was already washing over it. "What are we going to do?" Robert fretted. "We can't swim." Suddenly, John did not feel so brave. His adventure was quickly becoming a disaster. He scanned the sea around them for a boat or something floating on the surface that they could